Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present Chayim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and on this edition of Chayim, I have such a fascinating person to introduce you to. Most of the time, no one in the Jewish world associates the word Muslim and Zionist together. But the gentleman I'd like to introduce you to now considers himself to be a proud Muslim Zionist. It is my great honor to present to you Kasim Hafeez. Kasim, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, thank you.
What a story you have. Let me tell you what I know, and then I want you to fill in some of the blanks.
Yeah.
You were born in Great Britain?
Yes, that's correct.
Where, by the way?
I was born in Nottingham.
In Nottingham?
Yes.
You were brought up as a Muslim?
Yes.
Both your parents are Muslim?
Yes.
Do you have siblings?
I have an older sister.
An older sister.
Yeah.
Also brought up as a Muslim?
Yes.
And were you brought up as a traditional Muslim?
In many ways, yes. Essentially, yes, a traditional Sunni Muslim.
Okay, Sunni Muslim. And again, we don't know much about the Muslim religion, so
Yeah.
Jews know they go to synagogue.
Yeah.
We know you have a mosque.
Yeah.
Did you attend mosque services?
Yes, regularly. I'd go to mosque to learn the Quran also.
And you did study the Quran?
Yes. It's quite funny. I can read Arabic, like many Muslims, but I can't understand it. I can read the Quran in Arabic, but I can't understand Arabic.
Okay, you understand in the Jewish community it's exactly the same. There are many Jews who say they read Hebrew. They're reading phonetic Hebrew. They have
Yeah.
no idea what the words mean. But there is a value even to having that sound in one's ear, isn't there?
Yeah, of course, definitely.
Okay, so that's how you were brought up. In the Jewish community, there is, Hebrew schools, Talmud Torah, day schools, where Jews are taught all about about Torah, Judaism, Jewish culture, Jewish history. Is there anything similar for you?
We have a similar system at the mosques. They will have like a Saturday school or a Sunday school where you'll learn portions of Islamic history, chapters from the Prophet's life, things like that. Very similar, I think.
By the way, most Jewish kids hate it. Did you hate it?
Yes.
Okay. So much the same.
Yes, exactly.
And did you eat pork?
No.
Okay, so we share that in common also.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what we really want to know. When you were growing up as a youngster in Nottingham, and you were going to the mosque school, were you ever taught either anti-Israel or anti-Jewish material?
It was more implied. It wasn't formally taught, but there was always this implication with Israel and the Jews. There was always very negative connotations around them. And that was really the key. Things have got worse progressively, but when I was young, there wasn't this out-and-out anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which is just anti-Semitism repackaged. It was this implication of the Jews were always seen as very negative, and these conspiracy theories. The Jews control America, the Jews are trying to take over the world, things like that.
Did you have Jewish friends as a child?
No.
Do you think as a child you were frightened by Jews, the thought of Jews?
I was suspicious of them. Everything I heard was always very negative, and the connotations were always negative.
And what about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? What were you taught either explicitly, or what was in the air in your community?
Israel is an illegal occupier. European Jews have stolen Palestinian land. It was very much a black and white, right versus wrong. There was no two sides to that story.
So Israel and the Jews were the bad guys?
Yes.
Okay. And in some way the Palestinians and those who were part of the Muslim world were the good guys?
Yes, the innocent party.
Okay. In a note that I read about you, and you have to tell me whether this is an exaggeration or true, it says that by age 18, you were indoctrinated to radical Islam. Is that true?
Yes, that is completely true.
Okay, at what point does it become not this sort of vague general implication, But at what point does your education involve radical Islamic teaching?
Well, there were always hints of it. I mean, my father would always praise Hitler. He would say Hitler was a great man. His one failing was that he didn't kill enough Jews. So
You would hear that in your home?
Yes, quite regularly. That was my dad would always say that. So it was always in the air. And then when the Rushdie affair happened and conflict with the satanic verses, you saw radicalism start to rise within the community. There were these external voices really having an influence and saying we're not doing enough, and talking about these conflicts and using graphic imagery of these conflicts to really get their message across.
Graphic. Give me one example.
There was from the Palestinian territories, there was this picture that was circulated of this dead child, of dead babies, with limbs missing, pictures from which they said were from the Lebanon War. I mean, very, very graphic things. Images that are used purely to elicit an emotional response.
Do you think there were those in your community who were so influenced by these types of propaganda that they actually hated Jews and hated Israel?
Oh yes, without a doubt. I can completely confirm that, without a doubt.
You know, the popular notion, and one of the things I hope you clarify for us is what is real and what is even fiction from within the American and American Jewish perspective.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear is that there is an element within the Muslim world, not the Muslim world in its entirety, but an element, usually categorized by the words extreme, sometimes fundamentalist, but there's an extreme wing of the Muslim community which fervently believes that the caliphate should be restored and that in some way any piece of territory which had once been under Muslim control should be returned to Muslim control, and that in the long run the entire globe should become part of the Muslim empire. To what extent is that a legitimate description of at least a wing of the community that you experienced?
Completely. To the fact that there was actually a poster which was circulating, and it was sent via email quite a lot, called the United States of Islam, which was basically the whole world being ruled under this global caliphate.
So this is the environment in which you grow up in.
Yes.
Something happens to you, Kasim, and you begin to change your orientation. One of the things in the notes that I've been given is that you come across Alan Dershowitz's Case for Israel.
Yes.
When I read that, I said to myself, that's too simplistic. Life doesn't work that way. Somebody who grew up in this environment doesn't see a film out of nowhere or read a book out of nowhere, a book, and suddenly have, an epiphany and change in such a radical, stark way. I want you to tell me really the progression. Tell me the evolution. What was the first thing in your life that you said to yourself, I'm not sure this is right for me. I want to learn more. Take me through the process.
Okay. Well, the Case for Israel was a starting point, actually, because I saw this book, The Case for Israel, in a bookshop, and I straight away thought, okay, Israel has no case. This is Zionist propaganda. And, myself, I saw myself as an expert in the Middle East. I'd been given this narrative. I knew it was right. So I began to read this book, and he makes these bold claims that there's been a Jewish presence in the Holy Land for thousands of years, that there has never been a Palestinian state. It's never existed historically. And he talks about how it was the Arab states who invaded in 1948. The Jewish agency, the representative of the Jewish people went, we're happy with two states. So I look at this and think, this is nonsense.
Nonsense.
I know that there was a Palestinian state, the nasty European Jews came, stole the land, evicted the Arabs, okay? So I think, okay, I need to disprove this. This was the whole mission of buying this book, to debunk it.
Interesting.
And so you start researching, and you come across these arguments against it, which are full of rhetoric.
Give me an example.
That they may say that the Palestinian state never existed, but Palestine is in our hearts. Palestine has been in the Muslim soul. It doesn't change the fact that the Palestinian state has never existed, So I'm thinking, okay, So I'm confronting these facts bit by bit, and I start looking at a wider history. I mean, to the point of just looking at encyclopedia entries on Israel and Jerusalem, and I slowly start to see my kind of, these cracks emerge in my belief system. And it's not easy. It's not easy to go from believing something so firmly and then to say that, okay, maybe I've got it wrong. It's not easy. And it was a long process of research. And I'd reached a point where, okay, here are the facts that I've now got. I still can't truly accept them. So, and it's making, it had a huge impact on my life. I suffered from quite deep depression for a time, just not being able to reconcile the two. So as soon as I was able to, I thought, okay, look, there's only one way forward. I'm going to go to Israel. I will find out if it is this apartheid, militaristic, genocidal, racist state, or maybe it's something different.
And so you make your first trip to Israel.
Yes.
I want to ask this question repeatedly.
Okay.
Can you recall at this point in time, probably roughly how old are you at this point?
It was 2007, so I would have been, let's see how good my maths are, around 24.
Okay, you're early 20s still.
Yeah.
You told me your father had some pretty strong things to say of an anti-Semitic nature.
Yeah.
Does he know what you're doing?
Yes.
How does he feel?
We've not spoken for years.
And it started with this?
There were other issues, but this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say.
Okay. Was that painful for you?
It was disappointing, but I wouldn't say painful.
Okay.
I mean, in life, you have to do what's right. And if somebody is so full of hatred and can't see what's right and wrong, then sometimes it's better not to have them in your life.
You've mentioned your father. Is your mother in the picture?
Yes. Her stance is just to ignore it. If I ignore it, I don't acknowledge it, I don't have to deal with it. It's her way of dealing with it, I guess.
Okay. And what about your sister?
Now, she is hugely supportive of everything I do, and is very supportive of Israel, actually, as well.
Did she come along with you in some way on this journey?
Well, she spoke to me when I came back, because she was trying to understand why. Why have you gone from one view to another? And we had conversations, I gave her things to read and look at, and she's come to a different conclusion, let's say.
Are you close to her?
Yes, we're very close.
Okay, what's her name?
Shaheen.
Shaheen. All right. You're on your first trip to Israel. You land in Ben Gurion Airport, and describe to me how you feel. Even before you begin to sort of do your research, you're coming to a place that you were taught was basically the seat of evil.
Yes.
Okay, the plane lands, you deplane. What are you feeling? Can you remember?
I mean, it was interesting first because I flew on El Al, so everybody cheers as the plane lands, so I didn't really get what was going on there to start off with. So it's really mixed feelings because you're not sure what to expect. But no matter what I'd read, all of the kind of positive views on Israel, there was still this notion I wasn't willing to completely give up that, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be this apartheid kind of country. So I get into the airport, and now here's a huge mistake I made, because I ended up spending 8 hours in security at Ben Gurion. And, I take some of the blame myself, because when they ask you, what is your purpose? What is the purpose of your visit to Israel? I should have said, I'm here for a holiday. I decided to be very honest. I said, I used to be anti-Semitic. I'm not really too sure about Israel, so I thought I'd come and find out. So that didn't go down too well at all.
That is wonderful. You're wonderful. Good for you. Okay, so it didn't go down very well, and you ended up for 8 hours in interrogation of some sort, huh?
It wasn't actually a bad experience, okay? And I'll tell you why, okay? Firstly, this security officer was very polite the whole time. He kept apologizing, things were not good in Israel, and we have certain issues, and kept offering me coffee, which is fine. But I'd been to Saudi Arabia a few years before on a religious pilgrimage, and to this day, I've not experienced the level of racism that I experienced in Saudi Arabia. So here I was in, apartheid Israel, and I'm at least being treated like a person. You know, he's being very respectful.
I don't understand. Why would you be treated in a racist fashion? You're Muslim, visiting Saudi Arabia.
No. I'm not Arab though.
You're not Arab.
No.
Interesting.
And I'm not the only one who's experienced that level of racism. People who went along, because we went as a group for this pilgrimage, people experienced all sorts of awful treatment purely because they weren't Arab.
So here you are in Israel, and they're treating you, even though you're being
Yeah.
held, you're being treated with a certain degree of respect.
Yes, and that obviously was firstly quite shocking for me. And the questioning goes on, and I had a new passport. It had only been issued a few months prior to going, and he goes, "You've not got any stamps in your passport. Where have you not travelled anywhere?" I went, "Look, it's just been issued." And he goes, "So where have you been in the last 5 years?" I went, "Well, I went to Pakistan, and then I went to Saudi Arabia." So again, he takes a long pause, and so it goes back and forth for a while.
You're speaking in English to him?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
speaking English. And also, here's the interesting thing. This is the first time in my life I'd had a one-to-one conversation, or a conversation of any sort, with anybody Israeli or Jewish. 8 hours, maybe longer than I'd wanted to. But eventually, he goes, "Okay, fine, you're free to go. Look, if you come here again, just say you're here for a holiday. It's much simpler."
Okay. Do you go outside and take a bus or a taxi?
Well, my geography of Israel came into contrast. Here I am in Tel Aviv, near Tel Aviv. My hotel is in Jerusalem for the first week. I don't know anybody in Israel. I don't speak any Hebrew. Thankfully for me, I heard somebody on the cell phone speaking English, very London Cockney English. So I went, "Look, I need to get to Jerusalem." He goes, "Don't worry, leave it with me." And he sends me on, I'm not going to say a method of transport, an Israeli experience. He sends me on a shared taxi. So I get to Jerusalem, and that's how I eventually get.
Are
to
you
my
there with an Israeli or with a Jew next to you?
I'm surrounded by all sorts of. It's like I said, it's an experience. I'm surrounded by people wearing uniform, people Hasidic Jews, and it's like, okay, this is insane.
You've been dropped into a different planet.
Pretty much, yes.
Are you afraid at any point?
No, at any point, no. At one point during my stay at the airport, the chap from security went, "Look, we need to just go to my office." And we go along this corridor, which is exposed brick on both sides behind Ben Gurion. And I thought he was going to shoot me. For a split second, I thought, okay, they were right. Everything is correct. These people are crazy. He's going to shoot me. But other than that, there was no point where...
Instead, he gave you coffee.
Yes, he gave me more coffee.
Okay. So you travel in your sherut, your shared taxi to Jerusalem.
Yes.
And you enter the city. As you're growing up, a Muslim youngster, learning the Quran and attending mosque services and school, what as a child does Jerusalem mean to you?
There's always been the significance of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and there's the story of the Prophet Muhammad's night journey from Medina to Jerusalem. It's always been there, and it's been significant, but it's never been the be-all and end-all, so to speak, because the holiest cities in Islam are Mecca and Medina.
When you went to Saudi Arabia, where did you go?
I went to Mecca and Medina.
Was that exciting for you?
Yes, it was. I mean, it was an incredible experience. But what really did take the gloss off it was just the experience of being treated differently because of my race, and also it wasn't only that, because people within our group were Muslims, but not of what the Saudi doctrine is. They were manhandled for praying a different way from what the Saudis saw as being Islam. So, you see these things, and it makes it very difficult to have the spiritual experience you're looking for.
Is this have to do with Sunni and Shiite or something else?
It has to do with factions within Sunniism, because Wahhabism, which is what many people call the Saudi doctrine, is Sunni, but also you have Sufism, which is at the other end of the spectrum in terms of moderation, is also falling under the Sunni banner. So the thing is, with the Saudi doctrine, it tolerates no other deviation. You follow this way, or you're not a Muslim, or you're an apostate, or you're a deviant. So it's very rigid and very dictatorial.
Contrast from me, if there is a contrast. Was there any spiritual experience for you going to Jerusalem?
Oh yeah, I mean, huge. And Jerusalem was the turning point. I saw everything in Israel. I was seeing this mix of civilization, of Muslims, Jews. I'm not seeing these apartheid signs or anything, but it was actually in Jerusalem, in the old city, where I had, you could say, my eureka moment.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me more about that. What do you mean a eureka moment? What happens? To the extent to which you remember the details, take me through it.
Well, so I'm seeing all these things in Jerusalem. I speak to Christian Arabs and Druze Arabs, and this was the strange thing as well. Like a group like the Druze, I'm seeing them going about and saying how much they love Israel, and it's a group who have historically been persecuted in the Middle East. So it's still not really making sense to me, but I think, okay, that's fine. So when in Jerusalem, you go to the old city. It's what you do. So I went to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I went to the church. I thought, I'll go to the Western Wall. I'll try and go to the Western Wall. My Saudi experience made me think, am I going to be allowed near the Western Wall? I'm not Jewish. So I get through without any problems, and I'm standing there, and I pick up, 5 years ago, they still had those awful cardboard kippahs, which they've now replaced with cloth, but, I put on my kippah, and I'm walking towards the wall. I literally do like a duck and shuffle away from the Chabad emissary with the tefillin. I thought, okay, I'm not sure what this is about. So I'm walking towards the wall, and the whole time I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing here. This, what are you doing? But you go with it. And eventually I get to the wall, and I put my hand out, and then eventually my forehead goes against the wall. And I have this real moment of clarity where I think, okay, well, here I am in the state of Israel, a Jewish democratic state. I've seen Muslims, Jews, Christians going about their day-to-day business with no sort of separation. There's no impingement. I've seen Muslims going to mosques, Christians going to churches. Okay, this is a democratic state. People are free to practice whatever religion they choose. There's freedom of worship. There's gender equality. It's a democracy. There's Arabs are represented in every facet of society. And then I look back, and there's the flag of Israel where the Kotel is, with the blue, the white and the blue Star of David in the center. And I thought, okay, no matter what happens from this point, no matter what peace agreements are signed, no matter what conflicts may arise, there are 6 million who won't ever make it to this point. There are 6 million who died with that idea of next year in Jerusalem. And that really struck a chord for me, because I thought, here's a nation who I've hated. I've dedicated many years of my life to campaigning against. And this isn't about politics. This is the only real manifestation of the idea of never again for the Jewish people. And what struck me more than anything else was that after all the Jewish people have endured, up until today, what's going on right now in the region, the most amazing thing is that Israel as a state and as a people have not allowed the hatred of their enemies to define who they are as a state. And that's something amazing.
It's wonderful to hear you say this, and it should be that every Jew is as eloquent as you are. I want to come back to the notion of apartheid. When people talk of apartheid in criticism of Israel, they're usually not referring to Israel proper. They're referring to the way in which the state of Israel is treating the Palestinian people on what is known as the West Bank, and some Jews would call it Judea Samaria.
Yeah.
And the notion that Israel has been in control of this territory since 1967. The word we now use is occupation. By the way, I'm old enough to know that the word has changed over time. It started as liberation, now it's occupation. Yeah. And that the criticism of Israel is that the Palestinian people who are living on the West Bank are being controlled in a way that in some way limits their freedom and their ability to develop their own culture, and that in essence they are part of a larger system where they don't have a vote. Okay. And therefore they are a second-class citizen. Please understand, Kasim, I am not saying that I am in any way endorsing that, but I do want to articulate what the criticism of Israel is when it comes to apartheid. Yeah. If you believe, or if your view is, that all the land west of the Jordan River, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, is all one entity, then there is a group who controls it and who does not extend the same rights of citizenship to the Palestinian people. And that's what's meant by apartheid.
Yeah.
It's not about how the Arab Israeli is treated. And there are problems. The Arab Israeli is, in some way, a second-class citizen, although you have pointed out a reality that many Jews overlook. Arab Israelis have an absolute role in every facet of the Israeli system, and they vote, they have a party. Arab Israelis sit on the Israeli Supreme Court, on and on and on and on and on.
It's like any democracy.
But at the same time, it doesn't apply to the West Bank.
Yeah.
That's the criticism, which is sometimes expressed by the word apartheid. What's your response to that?
Now, it's the way you look at it. If you say that Israel should almost annex the West Bank and they all become citizens, people aren't happy with that argument because they say that it will be the setting for a future Palestinian state. Now, if you look at the restrictions, let's say, that have been put in over a number of years, they didn't come instantly post-1967. They have been in response to terrorism and security breaches. It's like this issue with ambulances being stopped at checkpoints. Prior to a Palestinian ambulance volunteer using it to transport suicide bombers, they weren't checked. I mean, it's an awful situation, and again, it highlights the uniqueness of Israel's security dilemma. And this is the thing, when people talk about the security fence has only come into existence because of terrorism, because of suicide bombings. So the issue really lies with when the hatred stops, when the terror stops, checkpoints can come down, walls can come down, but those people who have died in terrorism, they can't come back. And that's really the thing.
Kasim, do you believe in a two-state solution?
I believe it's the only viable solution.
Is there at the moment, in your view, a Palestinian leadership that is willing to live side by side with the State of Israel?
No. Right now, I don't see it. I know it's awful and it sounds negative, and it's not what I want to say, but as I see it, Hamas, their charter is very explicit. They want to eradicate Israel, and they're doing their best right now as we speak. And with the Palestinian Authority, they are doing this awful doublespeak where they say that they want peace, they want two states, yet the TV and their TV shows and what they're showing their children and in their textbooks, all it's doing is poisoning another generation against the Israelis. And this is the tragedy of it all. The Palestinian leadership, I firmly believe, don't represent the Palestinian people. I firmly believe that. And speaking to Palestinians when I've been in Israel. But what they do, and this is really, it's child abuse. When you are indoctrinating your children and further generations to hate, not saying you can be doctors and nurses, but you need to go and fight and reclaim your land, that's disgusting. That's child abuse to me.
For a long time, there was within the Jewish people not only a longing to return to Zion, to return to our ancient homeland, Eretz Yisrael, and create not only a homeland, but literally a civil society, a state that would reflect the Jewish people. And there were Jews who had to fight at times, both the Arab world and the British, in an attempt to reclaim Eretz Yisrael for the Jewish people. What do you say to those who would argue that the militants in the Muslim world, in the Arab world, in the Palestinian world, are simply at the moment devoting themselves to the same kind of struggle the Jewish people devoted their children to a generation or two earlier? Why is it different? Why are you critical of Muslim parents who say at the moment, we must reclaim our homeland the way the Jewish people felt they should reclaim their homeland before the establishment of the State of Israel?
Firstly, because the whole notion's false. Okay, the Jewish notion, as I understand it, was, we're here to settle in the land of Israel, and it's in the Declaration of Independence. We call on our Arab neighbors to live side by side with us in peace and make this state a flourishing state. right now in the Muslim world, with the radical Muslim, it's about annihilation. It's not about establishing a state. And this has been the failing for the Palestinian people. Their leadership is more obsessed with Israel not existing than their own state existing. And if you want to say it's a modern reaction, let's talk about history. Let's talk about Hebron in 1920. There was no state of Israel, yet Jews were massacred. So this isn't something modern. It's an obsession, and it's almost a hatred of having a Jewish state amongst them. And that's the issue. When this issue of Israel's existence is still on the table, is still being discussed, there's a problem.
You understand, as I listen to you, everything you say resonates so wonderfully to me. And I'll say this again, I wish there were Jews who could be as articulate and knowledgeable as you are. And then I say to myself, I wonder how your own Muslim community views you. In America, there was a phrase used for a certain kind of Negro, black, African American, Uncle Tom. Are you viewed by your Muslim compatriots as a Muslim Uncle Tom?
I've heard that phrase before. I find it funny because I find it almost racist. Because I'm a Muslim, I need to be angry at everybody and want to kill everybody. It is racist. It is racist, and people who have got that mentality need to grow up. The issue is, I live in the UK. Really, day to day, what happens in Israel and the Palestinians don't really affect me. So we need to be looking at moving the dialogue forward. We want peace. We want people to live in peace. All people do who are going, you're an Uncle Tom, you're a traitor, talk about hatred and fighting. Look, I live in Britain by choice. If I didn't like it, if I wanted a Sharia state, there's plenty of room in Saudi Arabia. If you don't like it, sorry, move to a state which is more compatible with your views. It's not PC to say, but that's what I believe.
At the moment in the Muslim world, is there the kind of anti-feminism that we sometimes read about in the American media? What's it like to be a woman in Saudi Arabia, or better now, what's it like to be a Muslim woman in Nottingham as part of the Muslim world?
Okay, Saudi Arabia, they can't even drive. They can't, the restrictions are numerous, so I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be in Saudi Arabia. In Nottingham, I think it's mixed. I think the majority of the population of Nottingham aren't radical. I firmly believe they're not radical. There is a radical fringe, and by choice, a lot of the women wear the burqa and restrict what they do day to day in accordance with their beliefs. But in general, I mean, my family, for example, they live a full life. They go out, they do the shopping, everything which you'd pretty much expect from, a female. That may sound really sexist by saying shopping, but it was the first thing that came to mind, so I do apologize for that.
And how does the Muslim world deal with the gay? What is homosexuality? And when we have heard that it's very hard to be a homosexual within any kind of Muslim state. What's your view of this?
It's awful, really. They are persecuted in every Muslim country, and it's intolerance. It's bigotry. You don't have to agree with something, but when you're treating anything with intolerance and bigotry and putting people's lives at danger, it's disgusting. It's unacceptable. And the fact that it is accepted and the United Nations sit quietly and allow this to happen, it just really highlights the hypocrisy we're dealing with at the moment in the international community.
Mm-hmm. You became involved with the organization Stand With Us.
Yes.
In Great Britain.
Yes.
Tell us about Stand With Us. How do you see it, and how do you see your role in it?
Firstly, Stand With Us, I came to the US on Friday to attend the Stand With Us in Focus conference. And that has been an absolute inspiration for me. I mean, we have serious problems in the UK in terms of anti-Israel activism and anti-Semitism, especially on campuses. And to see groups of 150 young students so passionate, so enthusiastic about Israel was so inspirational. And to see the actual Stand With Us staff, the campus coordinators, who I think I saw most of them sit down probably twice over the 3-day period, was just really heartening. It's inspired me because here you have an organization who are giving people the tools, who are giving people the information they need to fight back. And I sincerely believe the reason that campuses here are not as bad in the UK is because when people are making that anti-Israel argument on campuses here, Stand With Us is equipping people to fight back. Their statements and their lies are not going unanswered. While in the UK, people are making these libels and there's no response.
I want you to speak to me about the global issue. There are those who say in America that Israel and the United States are really at war with a faction of the Muslim world. Again, this extreme Muslim faction that wants to basically destroy Western civilization and replace it with a caliphate and a Muslim Quranic orientation. Kasim, to what extent is there truth to that statement?
There is definitely truth to it. You can't argue that there isn't truth to it, because there is. The issue is, though, it's very difficult to deal with because the main propagator of this ideology is one of the United States' closest allies in Saudi Arabia. So that's where you have an issue. But they've been very effective in propagating it all over the world, and there is definitely truth in the statement. There is a radical element within Islam, which is, and I think in Islam we're fighting for the very soul of our faith right now. The radicals against those who are seeing their faith being hijacked. To be completely honest, we're not doing too great at the moment, because it's very difficult to compete with Saudi petrodollars.
Are you saying to me that you believe that the establishment that is in Saudi Arabia, the Muslim establishment, really would like to see an end to Western civilization in the United States of America?
Without a doubt. I without a doubt.
So our alliance with Saudi Arabia is purely pragmatic and based on oil?
To a large extent, and I think we also know that the situation as it is in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi monarchy are the lesser of better than any alternative in Saudi Arabia.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes, that's absolutely sure. It's such a reflection on the world today.
And how do you view Iran as an expression of a certain kind of Muslim extremism?
I mean, Iran is the most dangerous state in the world today. And when I mean dangerous, I don't mean to visit. I mean as in its propagation and its spread and financing of terrorism and extremism all over the world. And I'm firmly of the belief that we cannot accept a nuclear Iran. The thought of Iran with nuclear weapons, the consequences for the world are just too shocking, too sickening to even imagine.
Do you ever worry that were Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, they literally would either use it or give it to someone who would use it?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you just need to look at Iran's record without nuclear weapons in terrorism, in funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah, attempted kidnap of a murder of a Saudi ambassador in the United States. There's so many possibilities, and all of them are pretty frightening.
Kasim, is Israel a perfect place?
Is there anywhere in the world which is perfect?
The answer is no. There's no place that's perfect.
Exactly.
But I still want to hear what you think Israel's imperfections are.
I think with any democracy, there are issues. With any state, there are issues. And you can disagree with Israel's policies. You can disagree with Israel's democracy. My main issue with Israel is their drivers in Tel Aviv. They're absolutely crazy. That's a huge imperfection. They need to really work on that.
Did you have a chance to speak to any Arab Israelis, Muslim or Christian, who in any way said to you something that did disturb you?
I heard, it was actually quite funny, I was there a few months ago, and I met a chap in Tel Aviv who had like a store, a restaurant, and he kept talking about this is all Palestine and we're treated awfully, and I thought, you've got a business right on the beach in Tel Aviv. You're probably making more money than I do at work. So that was quite bizarre. But on the whole, you hear these kind of emotional arguments. I heard them in the Old City especially. But they're from people who have businesses and shops, and I think, well, it can't be that bad. And that becomes frustrating because you feel like there's this almost dishonesty. I don't want to say people are lying, but it sometimes seems a bit dishonest when people say we can't afford to eat, and you've got 20, 30 American tourists buying all these souvenirs. It just seems very bizarre to me.
So, Kasim, does it ever occur to you you should become a Jew?
It's not really. My support for Israel isn't based on religion. It's based on, it's a liberal democracy. It champions the values I hold dear as a citizen of the United Kingdom. And it's, without being too cliche, it really is a country striving to be a light among nations in a very dark region.
Do you love your own Muslim tradition?
Yes, I mean, I have some great memories and some great, festival memories from my Muslim tradition, and I still hold those dear. I see no contradiction in saying I'm a Muslim and I'm a Zionist. I see no contradiction at all.
Another thing we often hear is that we wish there were a moderate Muslim Palestinian leadership, which when some horrific event occurs, some horrific event of terrorism occurs, they stand up and publicly condemn it. There are rare, but there have been moments when something has happened on the Israeli scene and someone on the lunatic far, 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 far right fringe has done something of a violent nature. The overwhelming Israeli, not only community, but leadership, publicly condemns it in the harshest terms possible. And there is a shalom achshav, a peace now within the state of Israel that has for years and years and years been critical of Israeli policy for not being forthcoming enough in the peace process. And one of the things we've always wondered is there in the Palestinian community an equivalent of shalom achshav, peace now? Is there within the Palestinian Arab world, the Muslim world, a moderate, that's the word that's used, I don't know if it's fair, but a moderate Palestinian leadership which is as critical of Muslim extremism as you are, with the ability, and I don't know if it takes courage or what, but the ability to stand up and say publicly in the United States, in the UK, or even in the Arab world, this is unacceptable from a Muslim perspective. And what you'll often hear people say is, we don't see it, we don't hear it, and until that happens, it is hard to be optimistic that there could ever be a real peace process that leads to a final solution where the Arab and the Jew live side by side, and that the state of Israel does not have to ever worry that a peace process is really an insidious attempt to dismantle the state of Israel. Talk to me a moment about what is or is not real about the leadership from a moderate perspective within the Muslim world.
I mean, talking about the Palestinian territories, I don't think there is any moderate leadership right now. There isn't. It's not, without a doubt. You see what's being said on PATV. We don't need to even go into Hamas. It's not moderate at all. There are definitely voices now within Palestinian society who are challenging it. Very small, but there is so much government control on every facet of Palestinian life. I mean, I heard about a group of Palestinian kids and a group of Israeli kids. They went to Canada for like a soccer tournament. It got some great media coverage. The Palestinian Authority condemned it, any collaboration with the enemy. And also, one of the most heartening things for me was I was in Israel a few months ago, and I met a Palestinian student at the University of Tel Aviv. And we were talking, and I said, people constantly say Israel's an apartheid state, Israel is doing this and that in the West Bank. And she was from the West Bank. She'd come into Tel Aviv every day to go to university. And she went, look, what gives those people the right to think that they represent me? They don't represent me any more than Hamas or the Palestinian Authority do. I want to live in peace with Israel, and I want to flourish next to Israel.
But that's rank and file, right?
As I see it,
Is there a
yes.
leadership? Is there somebody you can name for me who stands up publicly and says what you're saying?
In the US, I can. There's Dr. Zahudi Jasser. I mean, he's done amazing work in Canada, you've got the likes of Rahil Raza. In Europe, we don't have those voices as much, to be honest, and that's part of the problem.
You're facing an enormous wave of anti-Semitism throughout Western Europe.
Yes.
France, it's horrible. Great Britain, it's horrible. And normally what's said is it's because of the influx of a significant Muslim population. To what extent do you experience anti-Semitism? Not that it's directed at you, but that you see it, you know it's real. And to what extent is it a product of the Muslim influx into Europe?
It's quite interesting because, I mean, there's been a Muslim population in Europe for a long time. I mean, my grandparents came to Europe in the 60s, 70s. Anti-Semitism wasn't a huge issue. There's been a modern influx in the Arab world, and also, more disturbingly, this influx of radical Islamic clerics being sent by certain countries to propagate their ideology. And of course I see it. I mean, the school I went to growing up has a huge anti-Semitism problem. Do you know how many Jews are at that school? None. Absolutely none. But it has a huge anti-Semitism problem.
And there is violence.
You hear about violence. I mean, most of my Jewish friends I speak to, they always go, look, our time in the UK as it is, it's not a question of if we leave, it's a question of when we leave. And that's sad. I mean, that's really depressing.
Kasim Hafeez, you are wonderful, and it's been a joy meeting you. I wish you every success. In Hebrew we say, Kol tuva hatzlacha, only goodness and success for you everywhere you go. It's been a joy meeting you. I hope you speak all over the United States, all over Great Britain, and I hope maybe there will be other opportunities for us to share time together here. I appreciate your presence very, very much, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My meeting with Kasim Hafeez. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to the ideas he articulated. What's your response to some of the things he said about his own life, his own experience going to Israel, and what life in both the Arab world and in Western Europe is today? Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.